Breaking news rocks Las Vegas as Pawn Stars Chumlee, real name Austin Lee. Russell dodges prison with a shocking plea deal. But the chaos is far from over. Rick Harrison's empire is on the verge of collapse, his son sentenced to life, and Chumlee entangled in a legal nightmare that could bring the whole dynasty down. A bitter family war brews behind the scenes, threatening to destroy everything they built. Once a symbol of success, the Pawn Stars legacy now teeters on the brink of ruin. Stay tuned as we uncover the explosive truth behind Rick's downfall and reveal what's next in the dramatic fall of a Vegas dynasty. Rick Harrison, now 59, finds himself at the epicenter of a storm that threatens to erase everything he spent decades building. The Pawn Stars brand, once a pop culture juggernaut, a symbol of Las Vegas hustle and American grit, is now unraveling thread by thread. What began as whispers about his son's legal trouble has exploded into a full-blown nightmare, a life sentence handed down in a courtroom packed with tension, regret, and disbelief. And just when you think it couldn't get worse, it does. Behind the headlines and camera cuts, a betrayal is quietly surfacing, one that threatens to not only tarnish Rick's reputation, but sever the legacy he and his father, Richard the Old Man Harrison, fought so hard to create. This wasn't just a business, it was family. Blood, sweat, and loyalty went into every deal, every episode, every moment of televised gold. But now, that gold is starting to rust. When Richard passed in 2018, something irreplaceable was lost. He wasn't just the shop's founder, he was its anchor. Fans admired his blunt honesty and hard-nosed wisdom. Without him, the family dynamic shifted, the foundation cracked. Rick tried to hold it together through grief, through pressure, through scandal, but the forces pulling the family apart were relentless. Pawn Stars thrived because it wasn't just about objects, it was about stories. Every item that came through that door had a past, and Rick knew how to sell it. But now the most shocking story isn't on the shelf, it's behind the scenes. Lawsuits, addictions, financial strain, and secrets that were never meant to come to light. And as the walls close in, the question isn't just, can Rick save the shop? It's, can he survive the fallout? Stay with us, because what's coming next could change everything you thought you knew about Pawn Stars and the man who built it. It was the rare items, the stranger-than-fiction backstories, and the raw chemistry between the cast that turned Pawn Stars into a global sensation. When the show debuted in 2009, no one could have predicted what would happen next. Overnight, Rick, his wisecracking son Corey, and the ever-goofy Chumlee became reality TV royalty. Pirate swords, ancient coins, Elvis memorabilia, you name it, they haggled for it. The blend of humor, history, and high-stakes bargaining made it must-watch television. But fame is a double-edged sword, and behind the laughter and deals was a storm brewing. By 2022, the cracks in the empire were too deep to cover up. The once tight-knit Harrison family was imploding under the weight of greed, resentment, and betrayal. The biggest shock: Rick's own mother, Joanne, hauling him into court. She claimed her son exploited her while she was recovering from a coma, manipulating her into signing away her share of the shop. Rick denied it all, insisting she was fully aware. But the lawsuit didn't just demand money, it demanded blood. Over $500,000 was at stake, and she even sought a restraining order to stop him from liquidating assets. The drama spilled far beyond the pawn counter. This was now a full-blown family war. As if the family feud wasn't enough, the pandemic nearly finished the shop off. Once pulling in millions annually, their revenue plummeted to a jaw-dropping low, just $37,000 in 1 year. The empire wasn't just stumbling, it was gasping for air. Then came Chumlee. On camera, he was the comic relief. Off camera, he was a ticking time bomb. In 2016, authorities raided his home during a criminal probe. While the sexual assault charges didn't hold, what police found inside was damning stashes of drugs, unregistered guns, and enough bad press to tank a career. He cut a plea deal, dodged prison, but the damage was irreversible. The lovable sidekick was now a legal liability. And Corey? The heir apparent to the shop. He wasn't doing much better. Known for his hot temper and love of nightlife, he spiraled into bar fights and legal chaos that further tainted the family brand. What started as a reality TV success story had become a cautionary tale, a dynasty drowning in drama, legal hell, and financial collapse. And as the dust continues to settle, one question hangs heavy in the Vegas air. Can the Pawn Stars rise again? Or is this the final chapter of their once golden legacy? By 2020, the Pawn Stars universe was no longer just cracking, it was crumbling in real time. Corey Harrison, already known for his reckless streak, added another black mark to the family's reputation when he rented a recreational vehicle for a desert getaway. What was supposed to be a private escape turned into a public disaster. The RV came back wrecked, trashed with empty liquor bottles and garbage strewn everywhere. And worse, he allegedly refused to pay for the damages. The owner went public, and the headlines wrote themselves. Once again, the Harrisons were making news, but for all the wrong reasons. And it wasn't just the core family falling apart. The so-called experts who lent credibility to the show weren't exactly squeaky clean either. Johnny Jimenez Jr., the energetic toy appraiser fans had come to recognize, was charged in a disturbing domestic violence case. Then there was Drew Max, the high-profile sports memorabilia expert whose word was gold until it wasn't. Accusations surfaced that he had authenticated counterfeit collectibles, plunging him into a fraud scandal that sparked lawsuits and triggered a serious trust crisis for the show. With every new headline, every legal twist, the public perception began to shift. What once felt like a quirky, authentic glimpse into the world of pawn dealing was starting to resemble a scripted soap opera. Fans began to notice the difference. The magic was fading. The deals felt too polished, the haggling too rehearsed. Gone were the unpredictable negotiations and genuine moments of surprise. In their place, staged trauma and tabloid chaos. Worse yet, the heart of the show, the history was slipping away. What had started as an educational journey into the fascinating stories behind rare artifacts had now become a sideshow to the Harrison family's dysfunction. Fans didn't tune in to watch lawsuits, drug charges, and reality TV scandals. They tuned in for relics of the past and lessons in value. But somewhere along the way, the value was lost. And now, as the show limps forward with dwindling ratings and a legacy in tatters, the biggest question remains unanswered. Can the Pawn Stars find redemption? Or is this the tragic final season of a once unbreakable empire? What started as a celebration of American hustle and hidden treasure had devolved into a slow-motion car crash, one scandal, one betrayal, one legal bombshell at a time. The sparkle of Pawn Stars was dimming fast. Rick Harrison, desperate to keep the magic alive, had tried to evolve. His boldest move? Pawn Plaza, a retail complex meant to extend his empire just steps away from the iconic shop. But what was meant to be a crown jewel turned into a financial sinkhole. Tenants blamed Rick for poor promotion, foot traffic was a ghost town, and lawsuits piled up like bad inventory. Another grand idea gone up in Vegas smoke. Meanwhile, the show struggled to keep its footing. The loyal fan base, once million strong, was shrinking. Social media buzz had turned to silence. Even diehard viewers, the ones who knew every catchphrase and guest expert by name, admitted it just wasn't the same. The family magic was gone. The tension, once playful, now felt bitter. The deals lacked spark. What had once been a must-watch cultural phenomenon was now limping toward irrelevance. But Rick wasn't giving up, at least not without a fight. He knew the camera lights wouldn't last forever. With the shop teetering and ratings slipping, he pivoted behind the scenes, investing in real estate, side ventures, and anything that might keep the Harrison fortune from slipping through his fingers like sand in the Nevada wind. Still, the doors of the gold and silver pawn shop stayed open, and once in a while, the old spark would flicker back to life. Like the day a guy swaggered in, gripping what he claimed was a rare 10-pound British note. Not just any bill, this one had been splashed with ink by none other than the elusive street artist Banksy. The seller thought he'd struck gold, but the old man didn't flinch, called it a fake, worthless. Turns out, it was genuine, but only worth a few $100. That deal, raw, real, unexpected, was a glimpse of what once made Pawn Stars great. But moments like that are now rare. The empire Rick built is crumbling, and the biggest question remains, is this truly the end of Pawn Stars, or does Vegas have one final twist in store? Now here's where Pawn Stars truly shines, when history walks through the door and meets cold, hard reality. A Navy veteran steps in, carrying a brass sextant once used aboard the USS Hector, a World War II repair ship. He's got stories, pride, and a gleam in his eye. The old man? He's hooked. Military relics are his bread and butter. There's mutual respect, shared memories of service, and a passion for preservation. But let's face it, no one's navigating by sextant anymore. It's a collector's piece, not a practical tool. The vet wants $400. The old man, cool as ever, offers $200, knowing full well how rare and slow that resale market really is. They go back and forth until the deal lands at $265. A fair handshake, but not the treasure haul the seller had dreamed of. The next customer strolls in with an old black and white panoramic photo of a World War II airfield right in Las Vegas. He's convinced it's a gold mine easily worth $500, he says. The old man doesn't even blink. It's neat, sure, but not exactly in high demand. Just because it's old, he says, doesn't mean it's valuable. History buffs might appreciate it, but appreciation doesn't pay the bills. He tosses out an offer of $100, no more. The seller's face drops. He pushes for more, tries to bargain, plead, but the old man stays firm. No deal. The seller walks, photo in hand, lesson learned. Sentiment has no price tag in the pawn game. These moments, raw, real, unscripted, are the heartbeat of what Pawn Stars used to be. They weren't just deals. They were reminders of America's past, served with a dose of truth and a splash of Vegas hustle. But now, scenes like these are becoming rare. Overshadowed by lawsuits, scandals, and off-camera drama, the shop that once celebrated history is now caught in the middle of its own. Still, once in a while, the old spark flickers. A deal is struck. A story is told. And for a moment, the magic returns. But how long can the nostalgia hold before reality finally slams the door shut for good? Only time and the next item through that pawn shop door will tell. In the world of Pawn Stars, nothing grabs the old man's attention like a piece of authentic American history, especially when it comes loaded literally. Enter the Savage Navy revolver. This Civil War-era firearm looks like something out of a steampunk fever dream, bulky, odd-shaped, and undeniably rare. The seller strolls in confident, swinging big with a price tag of $1,800. But the old man? He's not easily impressed. He calls in his trusted gun expert, who confirms it's the real deal, but not without flaws. Back in the day, the Savage wasn't exactly a soldier's best friend, awkward to fire, heavy to carry, and quickly overshadowed by more efficient sidearms. Still, quirky collectors love an underdog. Estimated value? Around $2,000 maybe. But Rick, sir, isn't writing checks on maybe. He lowballs hard $800. The seller almost laughs out loud. Rick, no way. I'm thinking $1,250 easy. Back and forth they go, circling like seasoned prize-fighters. The old man stays cool, lets the seller sweat, then bumps it slightly. They settle at $1,400. Not quite the jackpot the seller imagined, but still a solid haul. And for the old man? It's another rare gem at a price he can live with. Then came a potential home run, a baseball signed by the legendary 1951 New York Yankees. Mickey Mantle, Joe DiMaggio, Yogi Berra. A piece of history in leather and ink at least. That's how the seller pitched it. He wanted $3,000. Cue the raised eyebrow. The ball was in bad shape. Signatures fading. No certificate of authenticity. The old man had been burned by shady sports memorabilia before he wasn't about to gamble again. In comes the expert, who confirms the ball is indeed authentic, but warns that its condition slashes the value dramatically. Rick tosses out a firm $800. The seller's face drops. "Simon," he says, "these are legends." But the old man doesn't budge. "Condition is king," he replies. "No deal." The seller leaves disappointed, but wiser. In the pawn game, nostalgia has a price tag, and sometimes it's lower than you want to hear. It's moments like these, tense, real, and deeply rooted in American culture, that remind fans why Pawn Stars became a sensation. Every item has a backstory, every seller has a dream, and every deal is a battle between emotion and cold, hard value. As the empire teeters under the weight of lawsuits and fading fame, it's these rare encounters that still manage to keep the show's heart beating. But the question looms, how many more deals like this are left before the doors finally close on the gold and silver pawn legacy? A fan walks into the gold and silver pawn shop carrying something straight out of geek heaven, a homemade Ghostbusters proton pack. Lights? Check. Sound effects? Check. Buttons that actually do stuff? You bet. The guy's clearly poured heart and soul into it, and he's glowing with pride. But the old man? He barely blinks. He's seen it all before. Nerd collectibles have their market, sure, but unless it's screen-used or signed by Bill Murray himself, good luck getting top dollar. The seller shoots his shot, $2,000. The old man practically laughs. "It's a replica," he says flatly. And let's be honest, most hardcore fans would rather build their own than buy someone else's. He slaps down a counteroffer, $1,000 flat. Take it or leave it. The seller wavers. He knows he probably sank more into parts and labor than he'll ever admit. But in the end, he takes the deal. Not the big payday he'd hoped for, but enough to bankroll his next passion project. As he leaves, the crew jokes, "You want to go watch Ghostbusters?" Hell no. Get your ass back to work. Not 5 minutes later, the next oddity rolls in, a towering 6-foot wooden Indian statue. It's got presence, it's got character, and it's got a story. The seller says it used to stand guard outside his grandfather's old tobacco shop, back when cigar stores still had charm. It's pure Americana. But again, the old man's all business. Sentimental value doesn't pay the bills, he says. What's it really worth? That's the Pawn Star's formula in action. Emotion versus economics. Passion versus profit. Every seller walks in, hoping for magic. But at the end of the day, it's all about the deal. And that's what keeps the doors open, the cameras rolling, and the fans coming back. The old man sizes it up tall, solid, hand-carved, and in good shape. A 6-foot wooden Indian statue isn't something that walks through the door every day. But let's be real. How many buyers are out there hunting for a giant wooden figure? The seller wants $900. The old man can't help but laugh. "I'll give you $400, he says flatly. The seller pushes back, asking for $600. But Rick, sir, stands his ground. "If I can't flip it for a profit, there's no deal." After a tense pause, the seller caves. $400 it is. The old man wins again. Another day, another lesson in pawnshop economics. Emotion doesn't sell. Strategy does. And some days, the shop felt less like a pawn shop and more like an art gallery filled with big dreams, bold claims, and that razor-thin line between jackpot and letdown. That was the vibe when a guy walked in holding what he claimed was a Picasso ceramic owl vase. Not just some knockoff, it was the real deal, crafted by Picasso himself in the 1940s or 50s, part of a limited edition of 500. The words limited edition always raise eyebrows, but in this case, it wasn't rare enough to be priceless. Picasso made tons of these owls, mass-produced and shipped out like souvenirs of modern art. The seller had held onto this piece for 35 years. Now he was downsizing and looking to cash in. He wanted a jaw-dropping $35,000. Of course, Rick wasn't about to take his word for it. He called in an expert. The art pro knew his stuff checked the stamps, the marks, and most importantly, the condition. That's where most deals fall apart. But not this time. The vase was pristine, like it had just left Picasso's kiln. Then came the truth bomb. Sure, some vases were listed online for over $60,000, but those were dream prices. The expert estimated its real value at around $25,000 tops. Still good money, but a far cry from the seller's expectations. Rick threw out an offer, $15,000. The seller was stunned. People list these for double that, he argued. But as Rick pointed out, asking isn't selling. It's what they get that matters. Negotiations turned into a chess match, each man bluffing, pressing, refusing to fold. In the end, they landed at $17,700. Not bad for a vase that had been gathering dust for decades. Another reminder from the pawn world: timing, condition, and knowing when to strike are everything. Just when you think you've seen it all, another Picasso walks through the door this time. A framed print from the 1950s titled Goat Skull on table, one of only 150 ever made. The seller? Confident. Years ago, he had it appraised at nearly $119,500 and figured asking $16,000 was a generous offer. But the pawn shop crew? Not so fast. Big names mean big risks, and nobody was cutting a check until their own expert weighed in. Turns out, it was an aquatint etching, a sophisticated printing technique that mimics watercolor but isn't hand-painted. Valuable? Absolutely. Worth 6 figures? Not quite. The piece was legit, but far from museum grade. A quick call to the boss sealed the verdict, $1,000. That was the top offer. The seller, clearly disappointed, hesitated but ultimately took the deal. Another Picasso changed hands, and the shop quietly added a piece of prestige to its collection without breaking the bank. Then, things got interesting. A different seller rolled in with not one, but 6 Picasso etchings limited edition prints from a rare book series. His price tag? $5,000. He figured the name Picasso would sell itself. After all, the guy's an art world titan, right? But here's the catch: while Picasso's name carries weight, not everything he touched turns to gold. Some of his work sells for millions, sure. Others, they barely crack a few $100. In the pawn world, hype meets hard truth. Every item has a story, but only a few have value. And when it comes to art, even a legend like Picasso has his limits. The experts rolled in and wasted no time confirming the truth. This wasn't just art, it was history. The 6 Picasso etchings were indeed authentic, pulled straight from a rare illustrated book titled Lysistrata, a special edition released in the 1930s. But here's what really sent jaws dropping. The book was signed by Picasso himself. That signature alone turned a valuable item into a collector's dream. Retail value? Easily $10,000 for the full set. But there was a twist: breaking it apart and selling each illustration individually could actually rake in even more. Still, Rick wasn't about to fork over $5,000 without a little dance. The seller pushed for $6,000, confident he had something special. The negotiation seesawed, both men playing it cool, until finally Rick caved. $6,000 it was. Another Picasso prize added to the pawnshop's growing gallery. "We got a deal," Rick said with a grin, shaking hands and sealing it. The seller walked away grinning too. He'd expected $5,000 at most, and left with $1,000 more in his pocket. But the Picasso parade wasn't over. Not even close. Next through the door, a hopeful seller clutching what he claimed was a print from Picasso's 1968 Les Celestines collection. The problem? No paperwork. In the art world, that's like trying to sell a Ferrari without the keys. Red flags everywhere. Rick knew better than to guess. He sent it straight to his trusted art dealer for a forensic breakdown. The expert ran through the checklist: paper stock, plate marks, condition, and confirmed it was legit. Real, yes. Rare, not so much. Picasso had produced many of these prints, and without a signature, it just didn't hold the same weight. The harsh truth: it was worth between $2,000 and $3,000. The seller's face dropped. His family had bought it for a whopping $9,000 at a cruise ship auction years ago. Turns out, those floating art sales are more hype than value. Rick offered $1,500. It stung, but the seller accepted. It wasn't the windfall he hoped for, but it was reality. In the pawn world, dreams come in framed and signed. But price? That's always up for negotiation. The shop had seen more Picasso in one day than most galleries, so when another seller walked in with not one, but 2 more etchings, even Rick had to laugh. One was the classic Dove sketch, the other a lesser-known piece titled Poor Roby. Both had the Picasso name, but as every seasoned collector knows, not all Picassos are created equal. The art experts stepped in for the verdict. First up, the Dove. A nice piece, sure, but mass-produced and widely circulated. It was the kind of print you might see hanging in a vintage calf, not commanding high bids at Sotheby's. Maybe worth $200 on a good day. Next came Poor Roby. Now this was different, an early edition, printed on premium paper with strong contrast and crisp detail. The expert put its gallery value somewhere between $800 and $1,500. A solid piece, but not a masterpiece. The seller had high hopes he was asking a cool $2,000 for the pair. Rick, as always, played it smart. He passed on the dove without hesitation and zeroed in on poor Roby. His offer? $650. It was a bold lowball, but not without reason. The seller thought it over. Sure, it wasn't the number he dreamed of, but it beat sitting on the artwork for months, waiting for a buyer who might never come. He took the deal. Cash in hand always beats potential profit. Was Rick's move a shrewd negotiation or a sharp cut? You be the judge. Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more unforgettable deals, jaw-dropping finds, and the behind-the-scenes hustle of the world's most famous pawn shop.